You're gonna start recording.
At 6 o'clock.
That's what it is.
All right.
So as we said, this is not an official board meeting. It is an informational meeting about the budget. Actually heard some rumors about why we scheduled it for this day. I do want to point out that Ludlow-Mount has, in all the time I have been here, held their informational meeting the Tuesday before the Tuesday vote. There's never any discussion about whether they will hold it. You have to hold it within 7 to 5 days. Ludlow-Mount holds theirs on the Tuesday before. Green Mountain holds theirs on the Thursday before. We did not talk about who or other things that were happening. That's when it's scheduled, because that's when it's always scheduled.
And that was me who spoke up about that, because I was scheduled to go to another meeting tonight.
And, once somebody told us about that, I'm sorry that
So,
that happened.
I'm fessing up, I'm
Okay.
the source.
Well, I appreciate that, and understand that there are always conflicts, but none of the people, at least I know knowledge of any other meetings that happen anytime. We do this the Tuesday before, and we've done it the Tuesday before the Tuesday vote every single time
All right.
that we've had this. So I'm sorry for a conflict with it, but there was nothing. There was no discussion of any other meetings. There was no
Okay.
discussion of anything other than it's happening on June 4th, so
Accepted.
it will be on that day. I'll stop talking. Well, I won't. I'm going to talk some more. But not about that.
And you are?
I'm Lauren Fearman. I'm the superintendent
Okay.
of schools. So what we're going to do here is go through what our budget is and answer any questions that people still have. We have information that has been up since the decision for the new budget was made. It's available on the TRSU website. There have been some posters that have been put up in some various places. And I know that we had some information go out into newspapers. So
Before you begin.
Yep.
I'd like to ask a question and make people aware of. Vermont is being taxed to death, which is one of the reasons I was going to try to go to another meeting to try to change some of our representatives. And this budget has been voted down twice.
no, not this budget.
No, a school budget.
Yep.
And the numbers I have still show a $1.1 million increase. That's almost 15% over last year's expenditures. And the budget's been voted down by rather significant margins. If this budget's voted down, it's my understanding you have to revert to 87%.
No.
No?
If this budget, just for some information, and then
Okay.
it would be helpful for us to go over it, which may answer some of your questions. But the process is we are required to have a budget. So if when the budget fails, we are required to continue to put a budget forwards until one passes.
Okay.
If we get to July 1st and a budget hasn't passed, we're still required to keep putting them forward, but we have to run the school. So we are committed to borrow up to 87%
Okay.
of this year's budget
Okay.
in order to keep things running.
Right.
But even with that, we're not done. If this budget fails, this board will have to get together and come up with another budget and put it forward. And they are required by statute to continue to do that until one passes.
Okay.
And we will still get money from the state because we will get like the special ed block grant. We'll get the tech money that we get. We'll get 3/4 of this base per pupil cost, which is like $13,000. We'll get 75% of that over 3 payments. So when I looked at it for this district, we only have to borrow like $350,000 in order to make that happen for this current year.
Okay.
But we'll have to do tax anticipation, which is another.
So while there's an increase in spending, one of the things that we have been talking about is as a result of Vermont's change in funding formula, which benefits our district.
Yes.
As a result of that,
Act 127.
yep, and as a
I read the
result,
whole thing.
and as a result of that, it allows us to spend the
More
money,
money.
which we are now, we've cut some things down, and it allows us to not have our base tax raise. So if, as you will see, the projected tax increase under this budget for Ludlow is a 1.74% increase over last year. The projected tax increase for Mount Holly is 4.38%. That is a result of having gone through and eliminated a lot of the things that would have been new spending. The reason for the increase that is in place is not that we are putting in new things. You have an increase in place for three basic reasons. One is that it's not on this slide, we can pull up another slide. One is that salaries and benefits have gone up. Benefits, which are mandated by the state, have increased by 16.4% in costs.
Question.
Hold on.
Okay.
And with the three things that we have are that increase, you also have in Ludlow-Mount Holly, you pay tuition for all of your grade 7 through 12 students. You are required to do that. And because of inflation and other reasons, tuition at other schools continues to go up. That has gone up by, and we can pull the slide up, $400,000 over last year. And then you also have an increase from the assessment from the TRSU, which is primarily because of our special education costs. Yes, it is. So
I've been through the numbers. There's salary increases, there's healthcare.
health benefit increases are mandated for everyone.
Non-union professionals.
Well,
My-
again, what I'm going to do here is I'm
Linda
going
and
to
I
present
paid-
something.
Like,
When I'm
no,
going
no,
to
I want-
present
I'd like
something,
this
I'm
to
not going to have
That's
an
fine,
argument.
but we need to
More
have
people
So
here.
you need to
present
let me go through it,
present
and
her
then you can
information
make your
first.
statements.
Why can't it be interactive when you get to that point?
So I'm
Okay.
going to go through this, and then you can make the statements that you want to make about it. We can respond to that, but I do not want to have an argument with
Is
you.
there anybody
I
on
want to
Zoom,
go
by the way?
through this. Yeah, we have a
Yes,
few
yeah.
people. So as we said, this is the increase that if you look at what that actually means in terms of what will happen for homeowners within this district. If you are in Ludlow, the CLA has caused an increase of $124.70 as a result of this budget that is being decreased by $94.70. So overall, if you have $100,000 worth of home, and again, we know nobody has $100,000 home. If you had a $300,000 home, your property taxes would increase by $98 for the year. If you are in Mount Holly with a $300,000 home, your property taxes would increase by $210 for the year. So you can take that increase and divide it by 12 and see what that is for you for each month. Our preference would be that we do not have any increases. Our preference would be that we don't have to, my preference would be when I go to the grocery store, I don't have to spend more money. But if the grocery prices have gone up, prices for everything goes up, it is a requirement that if you want to have some of those things, you have to pay for them. And I understand that there are people who would prefer not to have to pay for some of the things that we have to pay for, but we do have to pay for. So Cheryl, you went through and you added in a link on this.
So it's for the homestead tax credit. So if your household income combined is less than 128,000, you're eligible for a tax credit. So what you would need is your HS 122 that you filed with your taxes this past year for 23. And you take the information out of it, you need your school code, you need your taxes for the current year, as well as your income from last year, and it will calculate what you would get for a credit. The yield bill that's currently waiting for the governor to approve has an additional 13% tax credit for those people that are eligible. But that, again, has not been approved by the governor yet. Rumor is he's going to veto it, but I don't know what that will look like if he does that. But that's the calculation will take you through that.
And that's for people with a combined household of 128,000, you said?
Yeah, or less.
Or
Yeah.
So in terms of this budget, if my screen moves on, which it won't because I want to.
So that link will take you to the calculator,
back on the other.
back on the other page. And that's a live link in the folder.
So our increases within Ludlow, the big items are tuition, the assessment, and then dues and then capital transportation HRA reserve, which is the money that we put in order to correct the trouble with the heating system at Mount Holly. We talked about lowering that further. That's a gamble. And we know that we are likely to have to make those corrections. The board decided that they wanted to leave it in. So those three items, the tuition payments, the assessment from the TRSU, and the capital reserve fees are essentially where you get that 1.144 additional increase. It is an increase of 14%, which is very high. And as a result of the change in the funding formula, your tax rate is essentially far below where it would have been if it had just been based on the CLA. And we can pull up from the TRSU if you want to go through that as well. But
Can you go back to the tax slider one?
I think I can.
So if you look at line 15, where it says the projected base, so this current year's tax, the base tax was $1.43, and then it's adjusted for the CLA. Act 127, the intention of 127 was to allow us to maintain the same base rate and add money to our budget. We've been a gold town for years. We've given money to the state. This was an opportunity for us to get money back because of our free reduced rates and our small schools. Because we were at 20% when we didn't take advantage of it, but when the budget started failing, we came down. So that 13 cents that you see in the negative, it's money we could have had in the budget with the benefit of the Act 127, but we've essentially given it back to the taxpayers to lower this rate.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I understand that Act 127 changes how they calculate pupils.
Yes.
And you really need a degree from MIT to understand how it works. So it gives us more credit for special ed children.
No,
No?
no,
Lower income?
lower income and living in a rural area.
Okay. In the past, we have funded special ed and many of the things that we needed to do as for the schools, almost going into penalty phases.
Yep.
And the taxpayers have had that burden on them.
Yep.
Now, the state is giving us an opportunity to recalculate that pupil number. My sort of opinion is that we've been funding those programs for the schools. And that this isn't an opportunity just to add $1.1 million to the budget. There's people that are hurting from a tax standpoint. And I just feel that what I'm hearing is you're looking at the tax rate, not the amount of money being spent. So my focus is on the 1.1 million, not the tax rate. Now Cheryl sent me a very good analysis of the tuition. The only question I would have for you is, do we have any say in those tuition rates?
No. If it's a public school, we have to pay what they have announced. If it's a private independent school, we pay the state unified mean average,
Okay.
which,
So that's why Burton's like 18.1 and Mill River's 20,000?
yeah. And that's gone up to 19 something, which I didn't find out until recently.
What, Burton?
No, the announced tuition, the average
Yeah.
tuition rate.
Okay.
It's gone
So
up about
Burton we will wind up paying more.
to that.
So that, your analysis that I just looked at, Lily, at 5 o'clock made total sense on the tuition number.
Mhm.
On the supervisory union, I look at that as overhead. You can disagree,
I do.
and it's a non-union shop.
Special educators are part of the union.
Okay,
So are all of our paraeducators, all of our speech and language people, all part of
Bus
the
drivers.
bus drivers.
okay. But that number is up. You'd have to go back a slide.
We really need to look at the
There you go.
TRSU budget to,
The $542,000.
some of that has to do with, the special ed portion of it anyway. We have 264 students pre-K through 12 that are identified on an IEP. And this year, there was a shift in the kids of the split, and so special ed is divided between the districts based on child count, which is the December 1st, who's on an IEP. And I noticed a big shift of Ludlow-Mount Holly students that are now taking a higher percentage. The supervisory union is based on enrollment across the district, even the kids that go
Well, I
out.
know how you're parsing it out. My question is how much money is being spent in that building? That's
Well, that's
leading to the $542,000
Right.
increase. Now, sure, Green Mountain must have a huge increase.
Green Mountain also has the TRSU budget is assessed in its entirety out to the two districts. The TRSU, it exists only as a state-required entity to hold expenses for special education at an SU-wide and transportation expenses SU-wide, and certain other positions like your business manager and your superintendent, rather than having it in your budget saying that for your business manager, you are paying, Ludlow-Mount Holly is paying 30% of Cheryl's salary, and Green Mountain is paying 70% of the salary. 100% of it is in the TRSU budget that is then assessed back out
Right.
30 and 70%.
So how does a taxpayer evaluate the TRSU budget?
So the TRSU board meets once a month, and all of that information is available. We discuss it at each of these board meetings. When we have met to go through each budget, we go over the TRSU budget. And the TRSU board is made up of 3 people from this board, 3 people from the Green Mountain board, all of whom take all of these concerns very seriously. No one wants to continue to have things go up. No one is looking at this with oh, well, it's the TRSU. It is very important to everybody that we be keeping our budget as low as possible to still do the work that we think is necessary. And I don't want to be combative with you. I understand the position you're in.
I'm asking.
So,
That's-
yeah, well, and similarly, I initially, when we were talking over each other, but we just want you to understand the answer to it. So I can pull up, if you give me a minute to,
Because I went through the
Go through
TRSU
it.
budget
Yep.
line by line. And there were some huge increases in salaries. And there are huge increases in healthcare costs.
Yeah.
And yet Lydia and Alan Cycle pay $20,000 for our own insurance. We don't have a taxpayer paying
this spirit.
it. And so that has got to be taken into account when budgets are put together, that it's the taxpayer that pays these bills. And that 1.1 million additional dollars should send out alarm bells that that's a lot of additional money being spent.
Alan, did you see on that previous slide that our cost per pupil is down below the state average? You had referenced how in past years we were getting up closer to that penalty threshold, but that's really changed.
I don't honestly
we're
see-
down below.
I don't see an
13.
issue with the money being spent
Low.
at Ludlow and Mount Holly in that budget.
Yeah.
My concern, I had a concern with the tuition. Cheryl, I think, gave me a very reasonable explanation.
That's tough.
I go back to the TRSU as I consider it overhead, and I think there are different ways to manage special education.
We're not allowed to do it other than through the TRSU. It's by statute.
Understand, but how that is spent, how you accomplish the goal can be done in different ways that are more cost effective.
What do you have in mind?
I couldn't speak to it because I'm not there.
Alan, did you know there's a seat open on this board?
There you go.
Do you know that I was the chair of the school board for 3 years?
Yes, I work with you.
So know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And then the other big item is the boiler. Has anybody gotten quotes?
Yes.
Okay,
That's why we have that amount of money.
okay.
And it's the boiler, but it's also the tank is long overdue. It's, we don't want it to turn into a bigger problem if it starts.
They,
being
fuel
oil.
tank.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
over 30 years old.
But those are things I don't think taxpayers have heard. Like the nuts and bolts about,
We've been
talked about it a lot.
talking about it and putting in all the materials, but you're right. It's like you do need a degree from MIT. It's like so complicated.
So the TRSU budget, which consists of now 4, it was 3. We moved technology expenses. As you can see from this chart, the technology expenses up until this year were already being assessed in the district, but our vendors don't understand because we pay vendors SU wide when they would send us their bill and then we'd go to pay them from Ludlow and pay them from Green Mountain. The vendors say, I don't know what you're talking about. We work with the TRSU. And while we've managed that, it's a headache for the business office. It is better for us to have something that is done SU-wide be in the SU budget. So the expenses that had been, these are not new expenses. You had seen them already in your Ludlow budget, Ludlow-Mount Holly budget, and your Green Mountain budget. They're now being assessed back out. It is essentially the same. But that $400,000 increase looks like an enormous increase, but it's money that you're used to paying in your budget already. We're just housing it in TRSU instead of housing 30% of it in Ludlow-Mount Holly and 70% in Green Mountain. The central office, which you could say consists of some overhead, central office staff. Your central office is your superintendent, your business manager, your technology director, your special education director, and all of the various people who work alongside of them. It is your curriculum director, and a couple of things that are grant funded, but they're included in that are your after school program director, whose salary is paid by grant, your consolidated federal programs, Title I grant, salary is paid through the grants. But those salaries, and we talked about this at the last meeting, I hear people say you have to cut all of that fat at the TRSU. These positions are all, our business office used to have 5 people when Cheryl was the assistant business manager, and there was a business manager, and then an HR person. Our HR department is a person, accounts receivable, and payroll. When the previous business manager left, Cheryl took over that job. We did not hire an assistant. We had 4 people within that. Cheryl's over the last 3 years occasionally had to be 2 or 3 of those 4 people. It is not excessively staffed for us to do the things that we do. Within special education, we put in to do an additional person. We wound up after it failed twice. We took it out. We have 249 students in the SU with IEPs and that is a larger amount than you frequently see. Most places that have that number would be a district that had 2,000 people in it, and they would have a director, an assistant director, a point person for K-6, a point person for 7-12, and someone in each building. We have a person. So we had proposed putting someone else in. Mary does a great job, but she is not able to do all of the things that a central office person has to do in terms of reporting and managing the paperwork, and also be in all of our buildings, improving instruction from special education. She's doing the best she can, but we would need another person for that. However, the budget didn't pass, and it didn't pass twice. So we pulled that additional $100,000 out of the budget so that we could try to get a budget passed. The other jobs in there, the superintendent has an executive assistant, who does almost all of the agendas and a wide variety of things. The special education director has an assistant who handles calendars and paperwork. We have somebody who does Medicaid and other clerk work for us. We have, as I said, we have a curriculum director, a tech director, and 3 additional tech employees. Those have been people primarily in our buildings. It is going to continue to have 2 people in the buildings and 1 doing the data management piece, which we're no longer the place where you can have all of that happen in individual buildings. But 4 people in tech, we're going to have 4 people in tech. None of these positions are ones when we talk about what they do that people say to me, oh, well, we could do without that. And I had people ask me at the TRSU board meeting if I had to say what we could cut other than that special education, the additional special education person from the TRSU budget, what would I say? We've done that. And it isn't that when people ask, what can you cut? You can cut everything, cut all of it, and we'll figure out how to do it. But if you're asking me what will work best, you need a curriculum director. You need a technology director. You need a business manager. And you can't expect your business manager to also do payroll and accounts receivable. I know it seems like a lot, but we're pretty lean.
Can I just add to that, Lauren? The quality standards say, while they don't say you have to have a curriculum director, there's clauses in there that say you have to have somebody in charge of curriculum. So somebody's got to be doing it. And if people's plates are already full, it means you need other people to do that. There's only so many hours that we can pay people to work. That's
Lauren, have a hit in that special ed program that we have.
Right. So in the special education costs a lot. And as you can see here, $500,000 increase is coming from special education. That is not directly to the Ludlow-Mount Holly. A percentage of it goes to Ludlow-Mount Holly. A percentage of it goes to Green Mountain. But in addition to all of the expenses we have, we created 3 years ago. Is it 3? 4 years ago. That's time telescopes. 4 years ago, 2 special education special programs that are housed in the Ludlow Elementary School for students. They were initially separated into one for students with autism and one for students with social emotional needs. We've combined that into a intensive needs program, which over the last several years has saved us roughly $1 million a year, because those are students that we don't have to send out to outplacement and pay additional tuition and additional transportation costs. In the presentations that we do for the TRSU board, and in turn then share with both of these boards, we always go through that we're, as a result of trying to spend as little as we can while meeting our students' needs, those kinds of special programs let us reduce our costs. And I would not argue with you that there are additional ways that we can find under Act 173, a new act that is called for revamping some of how special education is done. And we're already seeing from that went into effect at the beginning of this year. I'm already hearing from some of our special educators that by changing how we identify students with needs and slowing that process down to be sure that these students can't have their needs met in a general education setting before we go to special education, we're already seeing a reduction in the number of students being immediately referred. So to your point, we
We
can't
do have the
control it, but we can
advantage
do
of
some
small
things.
class sizes in our community. So I think what you just said is wonderful. Plan. Like every child, if you have small classes, should have some sort of little individual education plan.
Absolutely.
Because a good teacher knows that every child learns differently.
That's it.
So, but when I put my financial hat on and I look at $4 million in 2020, and I look at $6.9 million in 2025, I go gulp, knowing that our total student population has been dropping.
Uh,
And it looks like a cancer. Like it's because it's every year.
it
Some of,
is.
some of it too is that we're on a block grant, not a reimbursement system now.
Big change.
And so that block grant is decreasing because they want everybody to spend the same amount per pupil with special ed.
Meaning the state.
Yep. we're on the high side, so ours is decreasing each year. And so that's part of that increase that we're going to see is because we're not getting the same funding.
So you're getting less revenue.
Yes.
And we have to go through and do the things that we have been doing with increased education for our teachers, both gen ed and special ed, about what differentiation looks like, about making sure that when we see a student who is struggling, our first decision is this something that can be addressed in a tier one, because we, even without tiny class sizes, it should be looking at our 80% of our students in this classroom getting the instruction. And if they're not, that's not a pull out and go into special ed. That's a change in the instruction that we deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And we've spent time over the last 2 years working with our teachers, not just our special education teachers, but also our general education teachers to understand that better. And that's a shift in understanding how to do it. And unfortunately, it all takes time. And we look at this too, that steady increase in this expense. It is disturbing. But we've been through a period of seeing, especially post-COVID, some increases in the number of students who have some special needs. These new processes, we're hopeful that we were now seeing, as we have a little bit this year, a reduction in the rate at which, it's not that we're seeing that now we've gone down in the number of special ed, but the reduction in the rate at which we are approving them has leveled off and started to decrease. We're still going to have an increase in what we have to spend the next year, probably the next year after
So
that.
with Ludlow-Mount Holly, what percentage of the kids are having IEP?
I don't have that at the top of my head. Like I said, we have 249 students. I don't know exactly
Low
how many
20.
are in which.
Low 20%, about how 21.
Just roughly.
Also, can I add to that? And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but with the new statutes in Act 170, whatever we're in, the triennial evals come in 3 years. So we've had an increase because of COVID, and now we have new rules, and those rules
Takes a while to catch.
right, we're gonna be, so the new rules are in effect, but as kids are being reevaluated every 3 years to see if they still need special ed, to see if they still qualify, to see if they still have the need for services or the same level of services. Now with the new rules, that will take some time, but over 3 or 6 years, you'll start to see some of that, I think, help out. It wasn't instantaneous when the rules changed.
And it said overall, we don't have the exact for Ludlow-Mount Holly, but overall, we're at a rate of somewhere between 20 to 25% of our students identified as needing an IEP. The national average is about 12. We need to be working on having a better means of identification, and not that we are then denying services, but that we're meeting those needs in different ways.
Because
But it doesn't happen overnight.
As a state, we're spending more per pupil. We're just a hair under New York.
Yep.
As, in a sense, the most in the whole country. And yet our proficiency rates as a state are horrible. So you have to ask the question and say, well, what are we getting for all the money? I mean, that's not a poke at you folks. It's just as taxpayers or someone who's buying a product, especially what taxpayers are doing.
It's a question we are all asking all the time. We are required, and even if we weren't required, we would be doing it, to do a continuous improvement, school improvement plan, to try to look at how we answer those questions in a way that is, we are finding ways to do it better. And our principals just went through that process, brought their improvement plans to our school boards, and had the school boards approve them. And they are good ideas about ways to address exactly that issue. If there were a way to wave a wand and just make it happen immediately, but it's this kind of work is changing more than just what time the school starts and finishes. You've been on boards. I mean, this adaptive type of work requires that people change what they're doing. And you can't make that happen by mandate. You have to make that happen with education, and it takes a while. I think we're in the right place. I think we're having those changes happen after I was just making my farewell speech to the staff earlier today, we went through 2 years of being essentially public health officers and not being educators. But these last 2 years, we've been able to refocus on education. And I believe we're seeing the results of that, and that you'll continue to see the results of that, so that you'll like the product you're getting for your money better.
Before you go, can we just, sorry that my back is to you guys. I just wanted to make sure that other people who had questions and thoughts also felt like if they were ready to say them, they could.
I'm sure we would speak.
Okay, I just want to make sure, you know, I'm going to give you the floor.
I can speak for Mr.
All
Michelle.
right,
I do have one question. Sorry.
go ahead.
No, under the new pre-K funding, are you guys going to be getting more money? In other words, there's the new payroll tax,
Oh.
and the state, I think, is
No.
coming through the payroll of 80 million and 40 million addition from the state,
We had to add
and they're
that to
using
it.
it to roll more money into either salaries or pre-K
Subsidies.
centers, if
Yeah.
you will, for lack of a better word.
No.
So I'm
we had to
assuming you
include
would
that
be
in the
getting
budget.
more funding through
Oh,
that.
we're not getting it.
No.
We're having to
We
pay
have to
that to
pay.
the state.
It's in the budget.
It's in the budget.
Well, no, that's in your payroll, but I'm saying you have pre-K programs in the schools, then shouldn't they be,
I don't think it's trickled down that far.
Not at this point.
okay.
Yeah. If we see it, it would be, because they set the 10-hour rate. It's the
Right.
universal preschool is 10 hours, and they set that every year. We may see it in that. My understanding is that subsidies have increased dramatically, and I think that's what the money's going. At least to start with.
I know the tax just started.
Not yet.
Well, sorry.
We got to figure out how to implement that one.
No,
It's about
depends on how much goes to the employees and how much you're keeping.
Goes
There's,
to the
I forget
employees.
what the percentage is, but it's
It's
like,
all being paid by the district because we have negotiated agreements. We can't take additional things out of the salaries unless we negotiate that with the bargaining unit.
even if it's mandated by the state?
For our lawyer, even if it's mandated by the state.
Okay.
Some of those things apply into pre-Ks that we partner with, as opposed to pre-Ks that are in our buildings. And pre-Ks that we partner with can pay their employees whatever they want to pay them. The pre-Ks that run in our building, as Joe said, the people who work in our pre-K are part of our collective bargaining unit. They're paid by our collective bargaining unit.
We may see, because the after-school program does collect subsidies from families if they qualify. And the director has told me there's going to be an uptick in that. So we may see it through that, not through the school budget.
Oh, that's the way you're talking. Yeah. that-
Cheryl, as I understand the yield bill as the legislature passed it, I believe they slightly increased the 9846. So
Yeah.
if the governor were to sign it, or if
It's pending.
if it was a veto and overridden, then the rates, our tax rates would come down a little bit more. Is that right?
It's a couple of cents. I mean, it's pennies. But
Yeah.
yes, it would go down. It wouldn't go up.
If that yield goes up, our tax rate goes down. If it's vetoed by the governor, we'll go to a veto session and then we'll have to wait to see what happens.
Right, because there needs to be a yield bill passed. Is that right? Yeah.
That's how we do our taxes,
I mean,
so I'm going to go with yes.
I mean, whether it's this one or some other one,
Yeah.
right?
The-
It's not that it would go back to being something.
The plus would be if some of these school budgets that haven't passed, my understanding is there's still 20 budgets that haven't passed. And what they need to raise in taxes, which is the general state support grant line, you know, if they see that coming down, then that yield could potentially go up. If they have to drop back and regroup and come up with another number, but We'll have to wait to see what happens.
They essentially, partly it went down a little bit because they took like the Airbnb tax, I think, and threw it into there. It wasn't a lot of money, but
Into the
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they added 3%, right?
Yeah.
the lottery.
Well,
The rooms and meals, rooms tax.
It's actually funded by quite a few different sources that,
I looked it up. It was amazing how many
that's also
there's
not,
use tax money that goes to the
Yeah.
schools, there's the rooms and meals tax that goes to school, there's lottery money that goes to schools on top of property tax.
and there's a certain amount of money they have to keep in the ed fund too. That's why they have to raise a certain amount. It's a percentage, I don't know what it is.
it's also wildly complicated.
I know, that's why I said you need a degree from MIT, and then you still can't understand it.
Once you understand it, they change it, so.
I got a degree from Harvard in my school. All right, that's our presentation though. Are there questions? Beyond what we've gone through?
I don't have anything to add to this discussion because I'm still trying to process it. But I just feel the need to say how grateful I feel that the job that Cheryl Hammond does and has done so many years. And that we are very blessed to have her in our office, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrea.
I agree.
Tell them to give me her.
Cheryl's done a wonderful job for us over the years, from the moment of stepping in and essentially doing her old job and a new job. And over these last few years, then being our HR person for a period of time, being our payroll person for a period of time. And she never says, no, it's too much, that's not my job. She just does it.
One thing I'd like to just talk about briefly is the CLA. Because the biggest problem here is the CLA. It's not that base tax rate for our education, what we need to raise taxes to do that. Because if you look, we're at $1.30. And because of the change in the CLA and that reduction, because we haven't been assessed, but if we get assessed, our property's going to go up, so our value is going to go up, so we're going to tax more. But that's huge. That has a huge impact on what's happening here and why we are where we are and having the discussions that we're having. And that percentage that the governor keeps talking about is because of the CLA. It's not because of the base rate. And that, I don't know if anybody read the yield bill.
No.
So in the yield bill, they're talking about doing something different with this next year. But you're going to come up with the same answer, but it's going to show that.
Yeah. So,
But I mean, in the end, it does come down to how much we spend per pupil
It does.
across the state.
It does.
Yeah.
But these discussions that we've had,
I mean, we can
because
parse out how we pay
came out
for
that
it.
we were having a 0%, and there was no change in the tax rate, this conversation would be much different than what we're having.
I just
That's
saw
what you
one,
went on,
I see 1.1 million more dollars. Not, I wasn't even looking at the tax rate.
And we've always talked about the budgets about what the percentage increase is. With the state's made us change because of this funding formula. We'll maybe go back next year, we'll have to see.
well, and as you said earlier, in a district that has every year said they want to spend as much money as they can spend in order to provide as much as they can provide. It is hard to, from that place, say that you are not going to, when there are cost of living increases, continue to see an increase every year unless you decide that you are going to remove things.
Right.
And talking about removing things, again, I understand the desire to go to a place that isn't within the classroom. The argument for those of us who work in central office is that we're in the classroom too. The things that happen in the classroom can't happen. And we had somebody say, let's try it without a curriculum director. You could hear from some people who've worked in districts without a curriculum director how well that works, which is it doesn't, because then your PD doesn't happen, your teacher mentor programs don't happen, alignment between your grades doesn't happen. And that those things are all part of what makes your classroom work. So going through that 1.1 million is tuition increases, which you're going to have because things are
And-
going up.
At 5 o'clock, I got the explanation and
Yeah,
it made total sense.
That's
The,
40%.
the boiler seemed really high, but now that you talk about a price of tank, that makes sense. And I think it is prudent
Yeah.
to put that money in there because, that could be a disaster in the middle of winter.
That happened to Fairhaven just a
No,
couple months ago.
I get it.
And deferred maintenance
I-
is something that we wind up doing, and that.
I still would like to hear, and I did hear you say, we need to look at re-engineering is not a great term, but the special ed
Yeah.
program, it's like our healthcare. You have to look at outcomes and then costs. And I'm not,
They said Act 173 from a state level was designed to do exactly that. We've gone through it, we're implementing it, and again, I wish I could say, so we put these things in place and already, but
I
It
understand
takes-
it's
it
not
takes time,
instant.
but
I
it's-
I
but
get
it's
that part. It takes
It's happening.
time. But I just want to hear it from you
yeah,
folks.
of course.
And the taxpayers want to hear it too,
Yeah.
because
They're good questions.
the taxpayers pay the bills. And they're hurting.
That's true.
Other questions?
I'm sold.
So let me ask you this question, Alan.
Oh, here.
He talks last loses.
Okay, never mind that. Well, no, you said taxpayers need to hear this, and we've presented this 3 different times now. We have meetings, a couple times on budget, information on the website, and people still say they don't know. How do we get to the taxpayers?
Well, one way is, I hate to say it, chemo locals. There's 3,000 people that look at that.
No, what?
It's a Facebook
Facebook
page.
And I'm gonna go take what I've learned tonight and spit it back out.
Thank you.
That's great.
I'm sorry, what is Okemo local?
Facebook group.
But 3,000 people look at it.
So that's the way you get information out for the most part.
It seems to.
We have the
Good and the
news,
bad.
we have the news flash in Mount Holly, is that analogous?
No,
Not a Facebook. Facebook's a whole different. Well, I know that, but I very rarely,
Front
Forum,
Porch
I
Forum.
very rarely
Ludlow
go to
is close
Facebook.
We weren't in town for the last meeting, so I wasn't able to attend. But I like to vote from a position of knowledge. Also be able to ask questions.
Great question.
Mr. Martin did a nice write-up for the chit chat
Oh, yeah.
about how
I think the postcard that was sent out was good.
Hope so.
It's in the front page of the journal.
and I know there are some things that are hopefully I personally put some things on Facebook that are question and answer type things, but then it needs to spread. So hopefully, that happens and I
Can you do
can't put
something
it
like
on
that?
everybody's page. I can only put it on and hope that it gets shared out. That's
Yeah,
that's
no.
my goal, right?
And I think most people want to educate our kids and do it the best we can. I think it benefits society. But the cost of everything, as we all know, pinching people hard.
And we have to buy the milk and the eggs and the whatever to make the hot lunch and just like your groceries go up, our groceries to make hot lunch go up and all the other things.
Again, I'm not being flip and saying that there's no one connected with putting these budgets together, including our board members, who does not take painfully seriously that it is hard for our community members to pay these expenses. Your board members all live in the community. I live in Chester. I would like my taxes not to have to go up. And we want it to be spending wisely, making sure that we are creating sustainable programs and that we are giving out better value. And are glad to have those conversations about it and to answer questions about it so that people can hear. We have part of the trouble with Facebook, we have a Facebook page. Nobody pays any attention to our Facebook page because we don't engage in any interesting flame wars on our Facebook page. So people get bored with it really quickly and they don't look at it. That what we need to have happen is what you just described. We put the information out there and hope that people will take it and spread it
Right.
further. We appreciate that you'll do it. June 4th,
Everybody vote.
next Tuesday.
Absentee ballots available.
Absentee ballots are available for both Ludlow and Mount Holly, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m.
And you can walk right in and just vote absentee and leave it. It's not like it has to be mailed and mailed back. So you can just
No,
walk
it's
in,
easy.
vote and leave it, right?
There are some yard signs that are available, but Ludlow, we can't put them in the ground.
Not in public property, on private property.
Yeah, where it is.
So do you and Deb have some?
Jeff picked up 7, I picked up 7, and we'll get those out tomorrow.
I saw
Where-
one today.
And if you, as we were saying to our faculty, if you live high on a mountaintop over a hill in Overdale, maybe you don't want to take them. But if you are in a well-traveled location, it would be great. I live on Main Street, mine is going. Yep.
Yeah,
So
that'd
they
be
are
good.
at all of our schools.
No one drives past them, so I will not bother to take one.
So you guys are gonna work hard on that special ed thing and try to figure out,
We are.
that's
It is.
a big nut.
It is, and it is one that we talk about every budget season. It is one that it is hard for people to see that and think surely there's a way that we can make it be less. And maybe, but that is not a quick process in order to do it. At the moment, where the expenses we have are all based on the IEP meetings that have happened, which create a contract that we are required to fulfill. Can we find ways to identify fewer students? Maybe, and that's what we'll look at.
I think
And
that,
when we can consolidate things, we do, which we have done.
I think when we hear our curriculum report, that maybe we could make that be the topic. Obviously, it's closely related to the continuous improvement plan that we heard about last time, but it'd be a good agenda item for,
We've discussed having
Yeah,
special education come in and do a report on what we're working on.
Yeah. It would be interesting and worthwhile.
You just off the top of my head, I had a question. If nationally it's like 13% of kids are special ed, identified special ed, does Vermont have a comparable number?
Vermont's overall is higher, and I believe that they're
I just looked it up and I'm not getting
somewhere
it quickly.
between. I think overall in Vermont it is closer to 17-18%. But I have not looked for that number for a while, so
I just looked really quickly and I'm not pulling it up, but that's,
Vermont's is, I do know Vermont overall is higher than the national average, and we're higher than Vermont's average.
Well, and if we have so few, so little students, one student is a lot of percent.
It is,
Right.
yeah.
So
True.
you've got a couple.
It skews the number.
Yeah.
Still a lot of dollars.
It is. As I said, we do a pretty good job of it in a lot of districts. Special education is the face of litigation for the district. In most places that I've worked in the past, there are half a dozen special education lawsuits going on in the district. And we don't have that here, which is, knocking on all the wood in the world, is a testament to the work that Mary and our special educators do to make sure that we're meeting people's needs.
And when you have that kind of litigation, that's a whole different kind of
That's a different
expense.
kind of expense.
That can be really.
So,
Right.
do we need a motion?
No, you don't, because we never called a meeting to order, because it's not a board meeting. This is an informational meeting. If everybody has their questions answered, we will call it done. If you have additional questions, you can call Cheryl, you can call me, you can send us an email. This is recorded, Okemo TV is recorded. It will be available for people to watch. And we're always going to answer questions.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thanks everybody for coming.